Welcome to A Different Point of View as we talk about our midterm elections coming up with two wonderful millennials who are in the studio today. We have Herlinda and we have Corey. And yes, we have a Republican and a Democrat, but they're millennials. So we want to hear their points of view and what's going on in this election and their perspective for what I consider one of the most important elections ever, even though it is a midterm and not a general. It's so important because there are 2 more years for the Trump administration, and that is going to be how it goes. It's going to be decided a lot in this midterm election. So welcome, Herlinda.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Herlinda Resendez, Erlinda, and I am from Dallas. I live in Pleasant Grove, and my parents, both of my parents came from Mexico. So they came from San Luis Potosí, Mexico, and the reason why they were coming here is to seek better opportunities. My dad came in the 80s, so he was able to get under that Ronald Reagan. And they've been here ever since, and here I am. So I am proud to be here and proud to be in Dallas also. So I'm a student. I also work full time, and I want to become an attorney, and I'm very passionate about politics.
Well, hi, I'm Corey. I'm a junior at SMU, and my story really starts with my grandmother. She was from New Delhi, India, and escaped a terrible childhood. We believe that her stepfather actually wanted to get rid of her, and she had to escape to a better life. And so she struggled through boarding school and had to jump through a lot of hoops to come here to America. And she made a future for herself here in Dallas in the 1960s, married my white grandpa, which a lot of people thought was unusual at the time, and people were rude to her. But she showed them that love conquers all. And she was a student at SMU, and a lot of those people that were rude to her became her friends, and they're still our family friends today. So if I've got any privilege, it's that I can continue on with her legacy studying public policy at SMU.
Yes, so I am Herlinda, and I live in Dallas. I'm also a student, and I work full-time, and I am very passionate about politics, and I'm very excited, and thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you. Corey, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I am from Plano. I'm a junior at SMU studying public
Policy. I'm involved in a lot of journalism, writing for Empower Texans, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the midterms go.
Okay. And you are a Democrat?
Yes.
And you are a Republican. But you're both millennials, right? So people have a lot of different ideas about millennials, and one is that they're not really engaged in politics. But obviously, that's not true for everybody. So what got you into politics, Corey?
Well, from a very young age, I was concerned with limiting the power of government. I was like, what do you mean I can't blow something up in my yard, Mom? What's this country come to? So I actually because I was super nerdy, one day I wrote down a list of limitations on the government that I thought would be a great idea. And then I showed it to my dad, and he was like, you just wrote down the Bill of Rights. And I was like, really? What's that? And so he explained to me the Bill of Rights, what the Constitution was, and how our government works, and gave me some books to read. And I started listening to talk radio, getting involved in news as well. And it's just all snowballed since then.
Cool. What about you, Herlinda?
So I knew that I was a Democrat when I was in 4th grade. I know that sounds crazy.
No.
So around that time, I think Bush and John Kerry were running a presidential election, and also around the whole 9/11 thing, when we were in school and we found out that we were going to go to war. Bush gave a presidential speech. So I'm sitting down in my classroom just trying to analyze, well, what does that mean? And seeing the expression in the adults' face like they were worried made me nervous, because I would think, okay, if I'm a child and they're the adults, why are they nervous and why are they scared? Should I be scared? And I would watch the news a lot. So around that era, also, there was a lot of discrimination against the Hispanic community. So watching the fear in my community, and at the time, my mom was going through a process to become a resident, and her having fear about the fact that she wasn't yet a resident. Just watching that and watching my community, it made me want to be involved because I started asking questions. Well, why is this law in place? Who decides this? Well, how did that person get that seat? Also voting. Okay, so how does that work? So getting answers kind of put a picture in my head, like, okay, so an attorney, for example, represents somebody and helps fight for justice. So that also, I became interested in law. So at the time, I went to an elementary school called Maple Lawn, and we had students from SMU, law students from SMU, that would come and they would explain the 3 branches of government. So we learned how the government worked, the structure of the government, and we did like a fake little polling location, and we were able to vote. So watching how the whole system works made me want to be more involved and learn more about it. So that's how I came into the whole process.
And that's a good lead into, how did you go from learning about politics to not just learning about politics, but wanting to be a Democrat or associating yourself as a Democrat?
Because I felt at that age that the Democratic Party, it represented my values. I'm Catholic. I go to church every Sunday, but I just feel like their values represent me better as a person.
Okay.
And I relate more with the Democratic Party.
And Corey, you as a Republican, so how did you go from just being interested in the rights and the Constitution to take that and then parlaying it into being a Republican?
Well, I mean, from the very beginning, the books my dad was giving me were written by conservative authors like Mark Levin. I think one of the first books I read was Liberty and Tyranny, and everybody else was reading Twilight or something. I was sitting there with a Mark Levin book. So I was kind of hearing from Republicans, from conservatives, and I think when the 2008 election came around, I really wanted to understand the difference between the candidates. And my parents weren't big McCain fans, but they were Republicans and they didn't want to vote for Obama as a Democrat. And so I started asking them, okay, so what's Obama going to do? And they started talking about Obamacare and all sorts of things that he had proposed. And then we looked at McCain, and we looked at the different positions of the different parties, and I started to feel that one of these parties was for increasing the scope and power of government in our everyday lives, and one was for limiting its influence to that which I think should be the purpose of a government, which is primarily to protect the citizens, keep it limited to that function. And so I kind of knew from there on that I was probably going to be a Republican when I got older.
It's kind of interesting the way you say it, because you have this feeling and you have this learning. And I think a lot of people feel that people feel them way themselves into a Democrat position, and people research their way into a Republican position. Like, you read it, you hear it, you just kind of feel a certain way about it. That's kind of interesting. Do you agree with that? You kind of just feel like this is what you should be. You kind of learn this is what you should be. So, but as a millennial, do you feel like that most millennials associate themselves as Democrats, Herlinda?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I know millennials also that are also Republicans, and I know a lot of millennials also that are Democrats. So it's a mix, I would say.
Do you agree with that, Corey? That
I'd say it's a mix. I think it's a stereotype that millennials are all the tight jeans and crazy blue hair and all that kind of stuff. But I think I've heard it said that there is a rising level of conservatism among young people because we're living in the information age, and people can research for themselves, and so they start looking into these different political issues. And I think that helps at least there to be more of a 50-50 ratio among millennials than past generations, which relied on education.
That's good. I'm glad that you educated me, because I have the stereotype that, millennials are all into Bernie and that kind of thing, and I'm glad that you're like, no, it's like half-half, so that's cool. That's cool. Now, the midterms. What do you think? What are your projections? What do you think who's going to win? And why do you think that way? And I know which way you guys are leaning, but What do you think? I'll start with you, Corey, and we'll come back to you.
Well, I think the midterms are very important because they are essentially a yes or no to the way that our politics have been going in this country. If people vote in a Republican red wave, then we will know that the American people are tired of what the media is doing to the president, and they're willing to stand behind him. Now, if there is a big blue wave, then we'll see that people are actually agreeing with some of the accusations that are levied against the president, and they're wanting to check him. Maybe even if they're not the most like leftist or liberal-leaning people out there, they're getting tired of some of the, I guess, controversy that's going on and some of the things that he says. So it's very important to kind of see what we're going to say about the conduct of our president and our government over the last 2 years. It's going to be very important.
What do you think?
So I am very excited that we're here. I have been waiting for the midterms since President Trump became president. So I don't want to make any predictions. I know a lot of people expect Ted Cruz to win because this is Texas. However, Beto has started a movement. He started a movement that has been able to, he's been able to make a connection with, I'm going to put Hispanics, for example.
Sure. Even though the Hispanic on the ticket is Cruz.
I understand
which is so
that.
interesting.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but between Robert and Rafael, I have to go for the white guy because when it comes to Cruz, he is the Latino on the ticket, but as a Hispanic, I feel like he, in some sense, rejected us. And now that it's election time, again, he remembered that he is Cuban and that his father also came here, and he is starting to use the Hispanic card, is how I want to put it. So I voted for Beto, and I hope he wins. So I'm going to remain hopeful that the movement he started and a lot of young people that started to vote, because there's a lot of friends that I have that have never voted, and they were clueless about voting or about elections. But this election, with Beto on the ticket, I saw a lot of I voted stickers on Instagram, on Snapchat with the filter of Beto. So for that reason, he has, I don't know who's leading in the young vote. I don't know how many young people have voted for Cruz or for Beto. I don't know the percentages, but I feel like a majority of millennials have been leaning toward Beto. And also the connection that he made with that he has made with the Hispanic community. He speaks Spanish, and a lot of his literature is in Spanish. So if someone's knocking on a door, there's literature that's in Spanish and in English.
Do you feel it's pandering to a demographic?
Not really, because I don't.
Do you feel it's pandering? You know, I was telling someone, and of course I'm a different age group than you guys are, but for me, when I was coming up in my age group, just for example, if you were to call, who I'm also hoping would win, Pete Sessions, I think if you were to call him Tyrone and put him on a ballot, I would be offended because it's kind of like pandering. So, and I think that's a different age shift. I think in my generation, we associate ourselves as more American than the hyphen stuff. And I guess in my family, I have a good mix, a good mix of all. But we see ourselves as more American than that. And if someone were to come in and pander, who say there's something like the Rachel Dolezal, remember that lady who said she was black?
Yes.
And then she really wasn't black, and even in her DNA, but then she put a perm in her hair and went and got a tan, and then, or even like Elizabeth Warren trying to say she's a Indian, and some people call her Pocahontas. It's kind of offensive, because why not just be who you are, and then just have your issues stand for your issues? But that could be like a different age thing. So
I understand what you mean. I don't feel like it's pandering.
Do you see yourself more as Hispanic or more as American?
I'm American, of course.
Okay.
But
do you think your group, people in your age group, see themselves as that way? Are you unique in that way, or do you think they see themselves more as or the other way?
I feel like everybody sees themselves as American.
Okay.
I mean, we can all agree that this is the United States, of
Yeah.
course. But at the end of the day, we can't forget where we came from. So me thinking that it's not pandering, it's not because I consider myself more Hispanic than American or more Mexican than American. It's simply because there are Americans here that they know the language, but they may struggle a little, and maybe it's easier for them to read it in Spanish.
Sure.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, sure. So okay, good. So now and you brought up Cruz and O'Rourke, and I think that is going to be one of the case studies for now into, gosh, millennia, because you have, yeah. Okay. We're going to go to break, and we're going to pick up about Cruz and O'Rourke when we come back.
Yes, and they do it so close.
Yeah.
And the thing about it
You
is
went
like,
to the same one that he's talking about? Oh.
Different one. Connecticut. Like, nope, not doing
I got
this.
scared the other day. I went and voted.
Good callback.
It's-
We're live and we're ready to go.
Yeah,
Ready?
we're rolling.
Alright.
All right,
3, 2.
Welcome back. And Herlinda brought up a wonderful thing that we were talking about Cruz and O'Rourke. And Cruz, who's running for U.S. Senate, trying to keep his seat, he's the incumbent, and O'Rourke, who's the contender for that race, I would say, is running an amazing and wonderful campaign. Very, very smart. And yet, but the thing that is what I'm amazed by is that Cruz is running as a Texan. I'm the incumbent, and he is Hispanic. O'Rourke is running as a Hispanic, and he speaks Spanish, so it's appealing to Hispanics, which is what Herlinda was saying. Is that right, Herlinda? Interesting. Now,
Okay. Go
Corey,
ahead.
you said you were thinking about that, and
Yeah, I've been really concerned with the whole hyphen American thing since I was a little kid. Like, even back in elementary school, I kind of knew this is wrong, what I'm seeing. And later on, especially after the 2008 election, I started seeing a lot of people my age, friends of mine. I got the feeling that they wouldn't consider themselves Americans first before Chinese or Indian or whatever else that they might have been, because everybody was really into identity politics at the time. And I think hopefully we started to drift away from that. But I think since the very beginning, the way I've come to understand it is that the Democratic Party has always centered around race and identity. They used to get white people to vote for them because white people were afraid of black people, but now they get minorities to vote for them and say, hey, oh, minorities, white people are against you. And so I'm just like, well, it's the same thing. I don't care who's voting against whom or what's going on here. Why can't we all just be Americans first? And that's one thing that has drawn me toward the Republican Party, I think, because for the most part, since its inception, over the last century and a half, I think it's been very Americans first. And we're all Americans, and we want to come together to protect our rights, to thrive as a people. And when I see identity politics popping up again, I think, no offense to anyone who's voting for Beto, but I think one of the reasons, I could be wrong, one of the reasons he uses Beto as his name is pandering. And that's just the way I see it. So I'm kind of trying to stay away from someone like that, and that's what makes me want to vote for Cruz.
who is the Hispanic?
Yeah.
I just think that the whole topic will be in textbooks 50 years from now, long after these candidates are gone, long after that seat has whoever way beyond, because to have the identity be one and not the other, and then to have the pull, you see what I'm, in my opinion. So we'll see.
I would just
Yeah.
like to
Yes.
say a comment about what Corey said. So I don't necessarily feel like him using the name Beto is pandering. He lives in El Paso, so we have to start with that. There's a big Hispanic population in El Paso, so they gave him the name of Beto, so to shorten Robert. And I don't feel like. I also disagree.
Okay, Herlinda.
Let me
I
disagree.
gotta stop you this here. You really don't think he's using Beto for any level as pandering when his name is Robert Francis?
I mean, we all know he's Robert Francis. We all know he's a white guy.
Okay, I
that
just want
is
to
on
be
the-
clear.
we all understand that, but again, I choose Robert Francis, the white Irish guy. I choose him
Over the Hispanic.
over Rafael. I do, because I feel like Rafael has forgotten where he came from, and like I said, I consider myself American. We all do, but we cannot forget where we came from.
But Robert Francis came from Ireland.
But he still knows the Hispanic community's issues. Ted Cruz, we can all be Americans. We all can, but for you being an American, it doesn't mean that you need to terrorize other people. That you don't need to terrorize the community. Ted Cruz believes that we should deport dreamers. Beto does not. And I agree with Beto, because dreamers contribute to this country. They attend our schools, they're our neighbors, they're our families, they're our friends. Ted Cruz is very negative when it comes to other communities. When he was running for president against Donald Trump, what did he say about our Muslim community? I feel like, we need to investigate them and trace them and make sure that they're okay. What does he say about the community? When he speaks about the Latino community, I feel like he stereotypes all of us. He stereotypes all of us, and he just rejects where he came from. And I feel the one that is pandering now in this point in time during early voting is Ted Cruz, because now you hear him talking about, oh, I'm the real Hispanic. I'm the real Hispanic, but where is the Hispanic Rafael when the Hispanic community needs him? That's what I want to know.
I think what Corey was trying to say is to be more the country than community. I'm a Black American, and I think, I think when any party panders to any group over the greater. And I'm not a spokesperson for Ted Cruz. I think he's talking about a rule of law. I know a lot of people who have Hispanics in my family, but I know a lot of people who want a rule of law over any segment group. So I think it's offensive that anybody would be here illegal. Period. I don't care if they came from Haiti, Kenya, Mexico, Honduras, Canada, England, that we have a law and we have a rule of law, and that should apply growing up. And when I was growing up, again, I am so much older than you guys. Shh, don't tell anyone. But when I was growing up, the Lady Justice was blindfolded. And that, the way I was raised, means that if you are from England, or you're from India, or you're from China, or you're from Mexico, or somebody, we don't care. And I loved that as a Black American. And we celebrated at that time this guy who had a dream, and his name was Martin Luther King Jr. And he said, I want to be judged by the content of my character, not the color of my skin. So I grew up where that was the elevation. To judge someone on other grounds when I grew up in this country was offensive. So to judge someone, to say, well, you were here and you have this tint on your skin, or you speak with an accent, or to judge people differently, I don't know. It hits me a different way, and that's why I'm glad we're here, because we can have a different point of view. It's just a little different than the way I grew up.
And I feel like that's the way it should be. We shouldn't judge people or stereotype people by the color of the skin, the way they speak, or the background they come from. And you mentioned laws, that we should follow the law. I agree. With that being said, the way that the caravan that's going on right now is happening.
Yeah, the caravan. That's a good segment into that.
We have laws and we have asylum laws. Let's follow those asylum laws. Why is it necessary to go and to say false things and portray these individuals as they're gang members when they're not, they're rapists when they're not, when they're actually coming here to seek asylum. So let's follow our asylum laws. Was it necessary to put kids in cages? It wasn't. That was inhumane, but it was done because our asylum laws weren't followed. Kids were ripped out of their parents' arms because our asylum laws weren't followed. So
do you think that the caravan is going to be a big issue for the midterms?
I feel like it already is a big issue for the
What do
midterms.
you think, Corey? Do you think it's going to be a big issue for
I
the
think
midterms?
so, and I think the way the media covered it is going to be even more important.
Yeah. So the caravans are the ones that are coming up through South and Central America. That's the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And you think it's going to be a push for Democrats?
I
And
don't
you
want
probably
to.
think it's going to be a push for Republicans.
Well, I do think that it could go both ways. I think if it's portrayed as people mistreating Latinos and Latinos who are coming to the United States seeking asylum, then yes, it's going to be a big talking point for the Democrat Party. On the other hand, I think Republicans do need to come out and say, hey, look, yeah, we understand not all of them are gang members or rapists, but we believe in the rule of law, and so if people are coming here to escape tyranny or seeking asylum, then we need to enforce our border. And if we're going to protect even Hispanics in our own communities over here, then we need to uphold the law.
I don't see it. I don't know how to answer the question because I feel like it's a very sensitive matter because it's not about something political. It's about people escaping violence and basically fighting for their own life to remain alive and to offer their children a better future. So I don't want to comment on saying if it's going to benefit the Republicans or it's going to benefit the Democrats. Let's just hope that whatever decision they did on their journey to this country, let's just hope that they get with luck and benefit from our asylum laws, that they're able to offer those poor children that are months, 1 or 2 year old on their way over here. That's how I would put it.
Like
in
we were
words.
saying, if the Lady of Justice, what's her name again? The Justice?
Lady Justice.
Lady Justice. If she's folded, then I don't think we should take into consideration who's coming or why they're coming. Because if we're going to uphold the law, then we need to say, okay, well, if they're going to cross the border illegally, then they need to go back where they came from. If they are seeking asylum, there are ways to do that do not involve trying to sneak into the country.
Any thoughts about that, Melinda?
Let's just follow the asylum laws then. They're coming to seek asylum, and we'll just have to see how it all follows.
I think
because
it's
it's very
great-
sensitive.
It is very sensitive, and it's very sad because I always hate how people manipulate the law. That's the reason Lady Justice has the blindfold, because it's not looking at the baby, it's not looking at the puppy, it's not looking at the crying lady, it's looking at the law. The law says you can only be here for under certain guidelines, and poverty is not an asylum issue. It's not.
Violence is.
Certain levels of violence, and because you can say, well, Joe beats me up, I'm seeking asylum. It's certain political violence. It's not just I get beat up by blah blah blah. So the laws are narrow. So and I think that's kind of the issues that people are trying to take advantage of the law. So because you can find a sad story everywhere. There was I think it's in Afghanistan. There was a picture of this baby that died and starved to death. That just happened. Why is it okay for the Honduran child but not for that child? Why is it okay for this child but not for the Haitian child? I mean, we can all find the sad stories, but we are a law, and and our laws our laws on the book are a lot tougher than the way they are being done, but I just hope that people wouldn't manipulate anybody emotionally.
Well, the law is oftentimes a very cold,
Yeah.
just very impersonal thing, and no one wants anyone to suffer.
No.
I hope we don't have a misunderstanding that if someone wants someone to be deported, we're like, yay, they're going back to suffering. No one's like that. But at the end of the day, if we're going to uphold the law, then we need to say that you got to go back where you came from, because we have a nation with
Of laws.
defined borders, a nation of laws, and we have our people and people coming from other places. And I think our first priority should be to protect the American people and to protect immigrants who are standing in line to come the right way, because they haven't tried to come in illegally, but because we're so busy debating illegal immigration, we're not able to pass legislation that makes the process of becoming a citizen more efficient. Because once we do that, it'll be a lot easier for people from all around the world to come in and come from all sorts of just despotic situations and become citizens.
But in order for that to happen, we would need the Democrats and the Republicans to work together, and I disagree where
I think that's a wonderful.
when you
yeah.
you disagree. I disagree with what you mentioned when you stated that people must follow the laws, and if they're not following the laws, then we're gonna have to say, then you have to go where you came from. Like, I do agree, this is a nation of laws, but this is also a nation of immigrants. That's why the Statue of Liberty was placed where it's placed, and it has a meaning. So,
But the Statue of Liberty is not a law.
but this country was built on.
Well, this country was
This
built
country-
on slave labor. I can say that as a Black American, but I think we are a nation of laws.
And the United States is a beautiful country. It's a country where everybody wants to come to, and many people have come to this country. And before this started, you were talking about your grandmother's story, right? So
If you'll share that story.
and I was mentioning that my parents came from Mexico, so I'm first generation American, right? But in the era that we're in, with the president that we have, so much hate has from my view, you may disagree, so much hate has been poured on many people by the statements that he says, and
Such as?
all Mexicans are rapists, the Muslim
Did he say
ban.
that?
He did.
He said all
He said,
Mexicans
and
were
then he
racist?
wanted well, maybe, I guess not everybody, but still, that's, you see what I'm saying? When he announced his presidential run, it didn't have to be that way. He didn't have to target the Muslim community either. And when President Trump speaks, and I turn on my television, I already know that he's going to say something controversial. That's
So
how,
you're prepped up for that.
because that's what we've had these
Because
2
you're- so-
years.
But you start off assuming that he's going to say that. So now
I don't feel like it's an assumption. I think it's something that it's about to happen because he does it every time.
okay. So I do want to clear the record. President Trump did not say all Mexicans are rapists. I just want to clear that. Some of the greatest people in the world are Mexicans. He did not say that. And he's worked out a wonderful plan with NAFTA and speaks very well. And I think Mexico is also working, just to correct the record, with America to deter the caravan, and has offered asylum to people to apply for asylum in Mexico who have come up. So Mexico as a country and America as a country are working together. And so I just want to clear that up. I don't want anything in the airwaves that I think would add to any more vitriol.
And I respect that, and
Okay.
we'll leave it to that.
Okay.
But back to that question, I feel like in order to for things to be able to happen, we need partisan work. We need Democrats and Republicans to work together to and to care and to remind themselves that it's not about them, it's not about the ego, it's about us, it's about the community and what's best for the nation and what's best for the citizens of this country. And that's just something that I feel both Republican and Democrats need to keep that in mind and stay focused.
Well, when people are out there chanting "Build that wall," obviously something very controversial, and a lot of people interpret that as being hateful toward Hispanics and other immigrants who are seeking asylum. Like you just said, though, we have to understand that we're a community as a whole, and we need to protect the citizens of the United States. And I think that building a wall is at least one of those things that would help accomplish that end. And at the end of the day, I just think that if we're going to be making laws that stand for citizens of the United States, we need to consider them before we consider different communities who are trying to come in illegally. And I think it's important to protect the United States citizenry.
Okay, good discussion. You brought it up again, so I think you're always a great segment into it. So let's talk about Trump for a second.
Okay.
You have assumptions, as you said, that, oh my God, she's going to speak, he's going to say something horrible. And is he one of the main reasons why that you are a Democrat? Is because it's kind of like, well, I can't stand Trump, so I'm going to be the opposite? Or
No.
like if Mother Teresa was on the ballot and she was a Republican, would you vote for her?
So here's the thing. See,
Sure.
I've always considered myself a Democrat. I started voting at the age of 18 when I was able to register. The first president I voted for was Obama.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends that are Republican, but I've also made a comparison of the Republicans that we had years ago and the Republicans we have now. For example, let me see if I can think of a Republican. Can't come to my head right now, but a lot of people usually.
You mean someone's in office, like George
I'm
W.
trying
Bush,
to trying to think of, yes.
Okay.
So, for example, let's put Jeff Bush as an example.
Jeb Bush?
Jeff Bush, Bush's brother.
Mm-hmm.
So, when he ran against Trump, you see two different Republicans.
You mean George W. In
Jeb.
2016.
Jeb.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
2016. His views were a little bit more modern.
Okay.
So I feel like, and now I feel like Trump is a very. How can I put this into words? I feel like a lot of Republicans, if they're not supporting, you're either on the Trump train or you're not. So which one are you? So
And the Trump train would be what?
Okay, let me talk about Trump, because the question was about Trump.
Sure.
So I've always known that I was a Democrat, but when it comes to Trump, I just feel like he has a lot to do with the tension being so strong now with Republicans and Democrats, because there's many Republicans and Democrats that get along, but on certain issues now it's just so hard because of the comments that Donald Trump talks about. For example, when it comes to women, when he was running for president and that tape leaked out, it was
The
like
Billy Bush tape?
Yeah, so it's like, oh my gosh, like Trump, why would you say that? So when that was happening and he was a candidate, I had fear, like, okay, so if this guy that's running for president is saying these things and is doing these things, what makes me think that there's not going to be a guy out there in the world and he's going to think it's okay to do those things because the future president of the United States can also do them. I just feel like Donald Trump is a very controversial, he's a very controversial person. The way he talks, I feel like it's sometimes, I'm not going to say sometimes, because I do feel like it's with a lot of hate on certain people. And I don't like Trump. I'm just going to be honest. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you for your honesty. Thank you for your honesty. Because that's what we want to do, is get to the core of the matter. So you just don't like him.
I don't like him. And when he became president, I said, okay, he's the president now. We're gonna have to deal with it for the next 4 years. So let's just roll the ball and let's go with it, and we'll see how it goes. The way he ran his campaign, I didn't like it either. I felt like he he made it okay for people to be racist, to say certain things, because he was saying them. So people felt like it's okay for me to say them because the president is saying them. For example, his rallies, what you mentioned about the wall, the way he says it, and the way he makes fun of other people, like Elizabeth Warren, or when he mocked the reporter. I just think that's uncalled for. You don't need to do those things. If you're the president of the United States, you need to behave like the president of the United States, and the law applies to you. How many people in your cabinet have been indicted or have been under investigation? You see, the law applies to you regardless if you're the president of the United States or if you are just a regular citizen. The law applies to you. So the way he speaks and certain things that he does, it just doesn't help me like him any better or any more or any less. I just dislike the guy. I respect him because he's the president of the United States. Let's just make that clear. I respect him. He's the president. He's the commander-in-chief of this country. But I just don't like him for the certain things he says and the way he refers to women, like in the video, or when he mocks people. It's just very uncalled for. Or when he goes on Twitter and starts calling out people the way he calls them out on.
Well, that's a lot to answer for. What are your thoughts about Trump, Corey?
First of all, I was a Cruz person in the primaries and with the rest of my family as well. So I'm not exactly a Trump fanboy. I think in a completely neutral context, a lot of the things he does say are just absolutely abhorrent. Just the way he, talks about different people and engages in name calling. And he called out my candidate's Cruz's wife, and I didn't like that. But I think we're not in a neutral context. We're not living in a respectful time, which I don't like, but it's just the fact of the matter. And I just think Trump is the right personality for the right time, because he can call out the media for their bias. He can say, hey, look, you're an idiot. And Trump is like a raging bull in a china cabinet or something. Everything just comes crashing down, and that's exactly who we need right now. Not even looking at policies, just in terms of his personality, that is something that I didn't like at first, but I've actually started to come to appreciate. And it's like if someone says, hey, look, Trump, you are rich because you got all your money off the backs of people in sweatshops or something like that. Trump's like, well, you're wrong. I have more money than you think. So, yeah, he's just completely immune to any kind of media criticism. And that's something that is really unprecedented in modern American history. And I've come to appreciate that. And I actually kind of study some of the ways he calls out people and engages in name calling, because obviously, again, in a neutral context, if there's no provocation, it's just rude. But in the political climate we're in, I think, yeah, we need someone to get in there and throw some slugs.
Well, so you're not in love with Trump, but you love the way how he banters back and forth, but you just don't like him.
I don't like Trump.
You just don't like him.
Mm-mm.
Is there anything he could do that would make you like him?
Maybe if he starts changing and proving me wrong, that he's not a racist and that he's not.
You know, you brought up a good question. And it's something that I've really wanted to know, and I really want your honest thoughts on it, and yours too, Corey. How do you prove you're not a racist?
You have to be okay, I'm going to use myself
you're honest,
an example.
Yeah.
So I don't consider myself a racist because I respect everybody. I respect your views as a Republican as long as your views as a Republican. But simply because I think that you may be wrong in an issue, I'm not going to just block everything. Say, you know what, you're wrong and you're dumb. That's just, you're dumb. I'm not going to say that. Or I'm not going to say comments attacking people's culture. You don't do that. And the way that, the reason why I feel like Trump is a racist is because of the way he talks about different people. But how do you prove that you're not a racist was the question.
Yeah, I mean,
so that's a good
honestly, question. And I say that sincerely, because that term is just thrown out. And it's such a dangerous term. And, what is the antidote? I've always said you can't.
Okay.
The answer to when someone says you're a racist is not saying I'm not a racist. It's like Nixon. You don't say you're a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I mean, but what honestly goes? I think we should be very careful with that term. As a Black American, his descendants of slaves, his family was beaten, his family was taken from each other. The whole horror story of that is in my DNA. And I think we're just too casual with that term. But how, in your mind, do you prove you're not a racist?
Okay, so in my mind and in my era, I think you're not a racist if you are respectful of others' culture, if you're open-minded to learn and to accept who others are. I think it's a start and how I would define that you're not a racist. Because there's people who are just not open to it. It's like, no, they're all the same, or no, like, they stereotype. But I think that the introduction to, my definition of not being a racist would be that, being open-minded, being respectful of others and it's in their culture and their background and where they came from.
Okay, that's very interesting. What about you, Corey? How do you?
Well, I think that the word racist has really lost all meaning in our modern political lexicon, because it's reduced to a political comeback when you have no argument, and that just trivializes the concept of racism, which is a very dangerous and real thing out there in the world, and we need to be fighting it. So when we have someone like Trump and people are calling him a racist, I just kind of think it's just a comeback. And I think if we're going to call someone racist, we need consistent and demonstrable evidence that they are harming people who they feel they are superior to, or feeling like they can take away other people's rights just because of the way they look. And I get kind of tired of it. I think for a long time the left especially has been pushing this idea, and I'm again kind of going back to race pandering, like we were talking about earlier, that white people are racist, but it's okay, you don't actually know you are. And I'm like, what? So I was like, no, that's just not the case. And I do think that some values are better than others. I don't want to conflate race and values, because when we're talking about cultures, that cultures really encompass values more than they do race, I think. So when people are out there saying certain people's values are better than others, some cultures are better than others, I don't think that's racist. I think it's racist to harm someone or talk down to someone because of the way they look. It's nothing but a set of common genetic characteristics. That's all race is. But when people are believing in something that in our culture we just think is totally abhorrent, we should call them out on it too.
Well, what an honor it has been for both of you guys to share your points of view, and millennials. And thank you for having a respectful conversation on some very different topics. And I hope that we can continue to have discussions about politics. And you've already voted and you're out there working hard, and you've already voted and you're out there working hard. And I hope that all of our conflicts can be confined to that ballot and not each other, because we really are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all Americans. So thank you so much for being such great Americans and doing your part to keep us that way. I appreciate you coming on. November 6th is an important election, probably one of the most important elections we've had. Just as important as the presidential election. Research the candidates, know why that you're voting for them, and then go vote your heart and your mind and your soul all together. So elections have consequences. So understand what they are before you push that lever, because once you've made that choice, that's an important choice. It could change the direction of the country, the direction of our state, and for many, many years to come. So important. Don't take it lightly. But go vote if you are educated on why to vote. If you don't know why to vote, don't just show up to vote. But vote vote by being a smart, intelligent, knowledge-based citizen and do your civic duty. November 6th.